research by Cleveland Clinic indicates that neonatal jaundice is a very common condition, and 80% of preterm babies develop jaundice during their first week of life. Our discussion for today is on neonatal jaundice, or jaundice in newborns, with Dr. Olivia Chalak, who is a general practitioner at the Ridge Hospital. This is Health Tidbits on Ghana District TV. My name is Mawina Wakati. We'll be right back. Dr. Olivia Chalak is here to tell us more on neonatal jaundice, or jaundice in newborn babies. You're welcome to Ghana District TV, Doc.
Thank you.
And this is Health Tidbits.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Okay. So when you say neonatal jaundice, what is it?
Neonatal jaundice. Jaundice is actually yellowing. Okay, and so yellowing of the eyes and skin of newborn babies in their first week of life. So that's neonatal jaundice.
Basically, that's neonatal.
That's basically it.
What are some of the causes of neonatal jaundice? Okay. What are some of the causes of jaundice itself before the neonatal?
Okay, so jaundice itself is not a disease. It is a sign of a disease. When we mention jaundice, we are saying that a certain chemical or a certain protein in your blood called bilirubin.
Bilirubin?
Yes, that's the yellow pigment.
Okay,
in your blood.
Okay.
So that pigment is produced when your red blood cells break up. Okay, so when the red blood cells break up, it produces a yellow pigment.
Okay.
That's what is called bilirubin.
Okay.
And then it's deposited in your eyes, and it can be deposited in your skin.
Okay.
You see, the newborn babies, their skin is a bit transparent, so when you blanch it, you can see the jaundice. But for adults, you usually see the jaundice in the eyes, and it's linked commonly with liver diseases.
Okay.
Yes.
Doc, how does jaundice develop in newborn babies?
Okay, so what happens during pregnancy? The body seems to have an aim to make sure the baby has the best of everything at the expense of the mother.
Yeah.
So during pregnancy, the baby's HB can be as high as 17 to 20. When a baby is born, the HB can be as high as 17 to 20. But when you go and check the mother's HB, it can even be 8.
Okay.
It can be 9. So it's like the best of the blood is given to the baby. Now that's very high HB. What happens in the stomach in utero, or when the baby is in the tummy, is that the mother's heart is what is pushing that very thick blood around. So the mother's heart has the power to do that pushing of that thick blood around in the baby. But the baby's heart is very small and immature and cannot do that heavy work. So when the baby comes out and is dependent on his own heart, that very thick blood needs to gradually break down so that the blood will be thin enough to move around the body. Now when the blood is too thick, it can block small blood vessels in the eyes, in the brains, and in the kidney, which is not good for the baby. So gradually the body breaks down these red blood cells. Now when these red blood cells are broken down, they produce the yellow. So it is actually a very natural process that is going on. However, there are certain things that can happen that can make that natural process more severe than it's supposed to be. So for neonatal jaundice, there's physiological jaundice and there's pathological jaundice. So when we say physiological, we are trying to talk about the natural process of things that will not harm the baby if it's physiological. But when we say pathological jaundice, then we mean that it is caused by a disease process. And that is the one that can actually harm the babies. Okay, so I was telling you about the fact that the red blood cells will break up and produce the yellow. Now the next step is that the liver should pick this yellow, process it, cause it to be deposited in the urine and in the poo-poo, then it will leave the system. What happens is that this is a very new liver that has come.
No, wait. Is that the reason why some newborn babies poo-poo yellow?
Yes.
Okay, so they are bringing out the jaundice? Or
yes. A certain tinge of yellow is from the jaundice.
Okay.
But also they are eating just milk. So that also brings out a certain yellowish kind of. But you see that there's a very yellow type of baby poop.
Yeah.
Which is from the jaundice.
Okay.
So you have a very new liver, which is a bit immature. So sometimes the liver is just not able to meet up to the job that is required. So the red blood cells are breaking faster than the liver is also taking out the yellow. So the excess one will be deposited on the skin and in the eyes, and that's when you see the jaundice.
Okay, so what are some of the causes of neonatal jaundice?
Okay, so this natural process can make the baby a little yellow, but there are other processes that also come into place to worsen the yellow. So very common infections. You see, when a child is delivered by a vaginal delivery, there are infections in the vaginal tract. So these infections can make the jaundice become a little more severe. Also, there's something we call G6PD deficiency. There's an enzyme. It's called glucose 6-phosphate. That enzyme is in many cells of the body. The function of that enzyme is to process glucose in cells. In the red blood cell, it also protects the red blood cell from being easily damaged or destroyed. Now, there are some people who naturally have either no levels of this G6PD or no G6PD. So now their red blood cells are very fragile and easily break. So when you have a child who has a G6PD deficiency, that child's red blood cells will break faster than the average child who doesn't have that particular condition.
Whoa. Doc, is it harmful?
Very harmful. So another cause too is ABO incompatibility. I'm just mentioning the very common causes. So that's the blood group of the mother. A mother and her child can have different blood groups. It's common. And so if you have a mother usually who is O positive or O, and the child is A or B or AB, what the mother's body does is that the mother's body begins to recognize this different blood group as an enemy. And then the mother's blood group can release factors that destroy the red blood cells in the baby. So it's a very common phenomenon, but within this ABO incompatibility, we have the very severe forms happening between O and B. So you have a mother who is maybe O and the child is B. Then you have, it can be severer in those children. So these are some of the very common causes of neonatal jaundice.
From what you said, neonatal jaundice is very common. How common is that?
60% of full-term babies, even up to 80% in preterm babies. Wow. So it's a very common thing that most babies go through and experience.
But are there preventive measures?
Yes, there are ways by which you can reduce the occurrence of neonatal jaundice. So for example, early initiation of breastfeeding helps to reduce the occurrence of neonatal jaundice. So you see, when you have a newborn, the first poo-poo of the newborn is very dark green. It's called meconium.
Okay.
Now, when that meconium is not passed, it's not removed from the intestine very fast, it increases the baby's chances of having neonatal jaundice.
Wow.
So one of the preventive measures, and it's even a method of treatment, is to initiate early breastfeeding. And in cases where you don't have a mother, you can even do formula feeding for the baby. And also there are times, especially women who deliver by CS, cesarean sections, may not start lactating early enough. It's very important that the babies are fed early. When they are fed early, it helps this meconium to pass through the gut very fast, and it reduces the chances of the babies having these symptoms.
How is neonatal jaundice linked to cerebral palsy?
Okay, so there's a type of cerebral palsy that is caused by neonatal jaundice. That is atetoid cerebral palsy. Now, so we talked about the fact that the yellow gets into the skin and into the eye. Now, there are certain levels of the yellow. Okay. Now, we call a certain level the photo level, and there's another level called the exchange level. When the yellow, the bilirubin, gets to the photo level, what it means is that we need to put the baby under the light to treat the jaundice.
Under the light?
Yes.
Under what light?
UV light.
UV light.
Blue light.
Please explain that part.
So if your baby's jaundice is up to photo level, there's this light, it's blue. We call it phototherapy. We put the baby under the light. And as the baby is receiving the light, it helps the yellow in the blood to break down. And then the broken down components will be deposited in poo-poo and urine. Okay, so that's phototherapy. If the bilirubin levels are also very high, the baby is sick, there's another type of phototherapy we call firefly. That is more intensive phototherapy. That brings the bilirubin levels down faster. Yes. So phototherapy and also breastfeeding is a treatment. These are the common treatments for neonatal jaundice. So you may be thinking, how will just ordinary breastfeeding solve the neonatal jaundice problem? So the thing about breastfeeding is that as the baby eats and then the food passes through the gut, some of the yellow that is processed by the liver enters into the poo-poo and it leaves. So as the baby poo-poos often, you have the yellow being removed. Yes, so it means that neonates need to be fed very often. They need to be fed at least every 3 hours. And as they are fed very often, they poo-poo more, they remove the yellow more, and their chances of developing the complications of the neonatal jaundice is achieved.
On that fearful note, we'll be back after this break. Please stay. So, you were explaining the link between neonatal jaundice and cerebral palsy, and you did mention atetoid cerebral palsy. Can you explain that one?
So, depending on the level, sometimes the bilirubin in the blood is so much.
Bilirubin?
Yes, in the blood is so high. Now, there's something we call a blood-brain barrier. Okay, now, and it's in the brain. So what happens is that when the bilirubin is so high, it's able to cross that blood-brain barrier and enter into the brain, and it destroys some parts of the brain. A common part of the brain where this bilirubin is deposited is the basal ganglia. Okay, and that's how come we have this atetoid cerebral palsy. Okay, now this atetoid cerebral palsy is cerebral palsy that is linked with movement disorders. Okay. So you see, between me and you, I can just touch my nose without looking. I can touch a point. People with this type of cerebral palsy are not able to, the part of the brain that controls balance is affected. All forms of balance is initiated in my ability to do this. Just touch it. But you find these people, they'll be doing this, doing this.
They are not able to.
They cannot do that. They cannot touch their nose. It's a common test. Some of these children may not even be able to walk. They may not be able to write, and it's quite a significant damage to the early brain. And there are some children that may never be able to recover from it. So it's a very severe form of brain damage that is very avoidable. But when you don't do these things, you see that the bilirubin levels keeps going high, and then we have something we call bilirubin-induced neurological defect. It's called the bind, and that's what also leads to this atytoid cerebral palsy. So untreated neonatal jaundice can lead to permanent brain damage. It's a permanent and it's irreversible brain damage that will affect the child for the rest of his or her life.
And it even affects the ear, their hearing.
Yes.
It blinds them.
Yes, it affects the hearing. That's also a very common effect. And also it can affect the quality of teeth that is produced in that the child develops later. You see that the teeth is stained, it's weak, the structure can even be too hard. It's like those particular functions are destroyed in the child. And if you have a child who has a permanent brain damage that you have to live with for the rest of your life, you can imagine the kind of stress that it brings to that family.
I can imagine. I learned you can, the son, as you did mention, that some mothers are advised to put their babies on the sun to prevent. What is that? Is there another therapy?
So that's also the phototherapy.
It's also part of the phototherapy.
It's also phototherapy, just that the one that is done in the hospital, the blue light, you know, the lights that you see around has different wavelengths of light.
Sure.
But the phototherapy that is done in the hospital, one wavelength of light, which is known to be effective, has been concentrated. So that is more effective in bringing down the bilirubin levels. If you just sit in the morning sun, it can help, but it's not as efficient as to use this light. And also, as part of the management of neonatal jaundice, we need to do a few screening tests. We need to know, one, first of all, what level of bilirubin do you have? Second, we need to know, do you have this G6PD defect? Third, we want to know, does the mother and the child have a similar blood group or a different blood group? Then it gives us an idea of the possible cause of the neonatal jaundice and how to manage it. So it is true that people can sit under the sun and breastfeed at home, but it's better for us to know exactly where the child is. You know, when I was in medical school, my teacher taught me that it's better to over-treat neonatal jaundice than to under-treat it. Because if you take all the precautions, you are sure that your child will not have a permanent brain damage. But if you overlook it and your child suffers a defect of the brain because you didn't take the necessary precautions, that's an unnecessary loss.
Can you give your last response?
Yes, so neonatal jaundice is easily seen within the first week of life, commonly seen from the second day onwards. If you notice that your child's skin or eyes are a little yellow, kindly report to the nearest health facility for the necessary to be done so that we can prevent permanent brain damage in a very treatable condition.
Thank you so much, Doc. This is an interesting topic.
Yes.
Thank you so much for elaborating on it, educating us on the do's and don'ts. This is where we do all the questions for Health Tips on Ghana Districts TV. My name is Mawina Wakati, and our discussion was with Dr. Olivia Chalak, who is a general practitioner at the Rich Hospital. Thanks for watching.